6 months ago, we bought a 1978 40-foot steel yacht with the plan to restore and upgrade it to a full-time liveaboard. With absolutely zero prior experience and little money, we jumped headfirst into this project. Learning as we go along, researching, observing, and with the help of friends and our amazing viewers here on YouTube, we slowly move towards our goal. Being on the water exactly 6 weeks from now. So, for the last 6 months I climbed up the boat on the starboard side, which is rather difficult because there's no space to put a ladder. So it's kind of like climbing up a scaffolding each time you want to get into your house. But then this week I suddenly realized that on the port side there is sufficient space to put a ladder, and thus access the boat quite comfortably. You can see it's not always the most difficult things that take the longest time to figure out. Next, let's take care of some unfinished business from last week's video, where I showed you how I tried to weld the hull below the waterline myself, and where I told you that I didn't feel comfortable showing you the results at that time. Well, I ended up hiring a professional welder to come and finish the job next week, so for now I might as well just show you what I did last time. So what I did this week is to remove all the welds I did last time to prepare the metal for the welder. And so, there's that. Here I'm removing the real wood plates that were covering the floor, here in the forward cabin, and getting all the stuff out of the bilge. Because the plan for today is to make the hole in the floor a bit bigger. And we do this of course so that we can gain access to put in the new water system, which we are currently planning, and the building of which is gonna be material for future videos. So for now, let's rejoice ourselves at the ruthless destruction of the existing infrastructure. Next I have to remove the pipes from the old system, which luckily was rather simple, so not too difficult. In the process of cleaning up, I found some 5-year-old chocolate. It gives us an indication of when the boat was last time in use. Now to finish up here in the forward cabin, I did some smaller jobs like here, removing the rust and putting some rust converter on it. Or to unscrew this old seacock. And we hope to use this water inlet in our future water system. Here I'm removing the old pipes that we used to flush the toilet. Next I want to put back the ladder into the aft cabin. On the bottom of the feet there's a little brass pin on one side, which is missing on the other side. Coincidentally, this little piece from some IKEA furniture fit into it perfectly. Now, of course, because there's no insulation yet, and the panels that will cover the walls eventually are not put in place yet, I added some wood to accommodate for that temporarily, so that we can drill the holes on the right place as it will be in the end. This is an 8-ton lifting jack, which we need, well, to lift up the boat. But first we need to build a base because it's not quite long enough.
Willst du wegmachen oder was meinst du?
Yes, wegmachen, or to remove. Or at least displace, so we can gain access to this through hull, which was covered by the wood before. Now I can cut this out and get this ready for the welder next week. Now let's move back inside and get started with working on the engine. First a little cleaning with compressed air. Next I'm gonna try to make some sense out of those remaining wires coming to and from the engine, so that we can slowly start rewiring it. But to do that, first we have to understand it. I found some old wiring diagrams, with the help of which I'm trying to figure out which wire does what and has to go where and so on. In case you wonder, G is for ground. And so I tried my best to prepare and get the engine ready for the days to come. Here we are back on another day with the intention to start the engine for the first time. For this we bought some diesel, some engine oil, a new starter battery and distilled water. Just in case we may need any of those. Once again, my good friend agreed to come along because he has some experience with engines in general. First, let's check the oil, which apparently had been changed not too long ago in terms of engine runtime. Next, we try to systematically rebuild the most basic wiring necessary to start up the engine. Or here actually we are wiring the engine stop button, because since it's a water-cooled engine with a wet exhaust system, it's important not to let it run too long. Right, great. Now that we got that going, let's try to hook up the starter motor and the alternator. And of course, in the middle of all this, there's the ignition cylinder. This is essentially nothing else than a switch with 3 positions, 0, 1 and 2. With position 2 being spring-loaded so that it will automatically go back to position 1 once you stop twisting it. So the way I found out how it works is I put the diodes randomly into the connectors here on the back of the cylinder and just checked which points have continuity, and now we are in position 0 and obviously there's no continuity between any of the points. Now we put it to position 1. There's no continuity here, but here there's continuity. Now if I put the connectors to these 2 wires, now I put it to position 2, you can see there we get continuity, but only as long as we hold the key in that position. As it jumps back, the connection is cut again. And so by this simple test I was able to conclude which cable is going to the battery, which cable is going to the starter motor, basically how this thing works. So, armed with these insights, we tried our best to wire everything properly and went ahead for a first test.
Nur kurz, tak, tak, Strip.
Okay.
Einmal.
Nein.
Und dann kurz.
1. Unfortunately, we did not get it running on that day. The next day I came back, this time by myself, and thought I'd give it another try. Here's what happened. Honestly, I did not expect the engine to run, especially not after hitting the starter motor only a couple of times. The reason why it didn't work on the day before is that we had this cable in the wrong position. This cable, when given current, will excite the starter solenoid, which will then tell the starter motor to turn and thus start the engine. So, who wants to see the engine starting up again? Here we go. I got a set of knee pads, which will make the next task much less painful. We're gonna need the following tools: some drills, some wood clamps, and a bunch of screws. And the task at hand is to screw down those narrow wooden beams onto the steel angle profiles. Luckily, a lot of the angle profiles already had some holes drilled into them, so for the most part I only had to drill holes through the wood. On other areas, on the other hand, I had to drill the holes through the steel by myself. And I make sure every screw is sunken into the wood so they don't stick out at the end. Right now, let's watch this entire process one more time, step by step. First I attach the wooden beam onto the steel angle profile. Then I drill the holes through the wood using a wood drill. Next I drill the holes through the steel, here using a drill for metal, all the while making sure I don't go too fast, so I don't overheat the drill bit. Keep everything nice and tidy as we go along. Here I'm using the counter drill bit again to allow the screws to sink down into the hole and not stick out. And I'm using thread locker to prevent the nuts from untightening themselves due to the vibrations from the motor. And now in 30 seconds how I put in the remaining of the wooden beams. In reality, this took of course an entire day. And there was no classical music playing in the background. Right, on to the last task of this video, which was to trim down the screws for the forward hatches. First I marked the length of the screw coming out on the other side. Then I cut them accordingly, and because the screws will end up all having different lengths, I have to make sure I don't mix them up, so I put them next to the hole after I cut them. Next I grind away the sharp edges, and there you have it. And that, my friends, is everything that happened in this week. With this I'm signing off. Hello. Thank you all for watching, and see you again in the next video.